I said yum.
Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for October 30th, 2017. We'll begin with a special order calendar, continued hearings. Item number 1, 18996BZ, 851012 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens.
Okay. They provided a public assembly permit and a photo showing the property cleaned up, I think, relatively, and an opaque fence that was decorative of a certain style that conceals the HVAC on the roof. It's actually much better because it's really a jumbled mess on the roof, I think. And they also removed the barbed wire.
Right. Yes.
So are we good with this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. New cases, item number 2, 53186BZ, 787 7th Avenue, Manhattan. It's a PCE.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board 5 waived its recommendation. We have an affidavit from fire safety contractor stating that alarm and sprinkler systems are operational. This is a legalization. Actually, all the PCEs today are legalization. That is operational, and also we have a 1999 letter of approval from the fire department with respect to the fire alarm system, and they also provided photos showing various elements. And I just want to note to council that the applicant noted that the actual area of the PCE is less than that was indicated on the 2008 resolution. So they indicated it as 28,350 square feet, but according to the applicant, it's actually 10,000 less than that. It's 18,171 square feet, but that's such a huge difference. I'd really like them to triple check their numbers, yeah. Well, he said that he thinks that they double counted double height space. So that's yeah, like when you take a section on the floor plan, the double height space shows up again and there's no X in it, so maybe.
It's open, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's a likely reason.
I just had a question. It wasn't quite clear from the plans, but it seems there are spaces that are allocated for a massage service, so I wanted to know if massage service is being provided, and if so,
We need that license.
legal license. Yeah.
Okay.
Go. Item number 3, 10415BZ, 4452 Broadway, Manhattan. I know we have to change the name on that thing.
Yes, hold on a second.
It should be Safe Art, right?
Oh, okay, that isn't right. Yeah, so the law firm is different than what's shown on.
Yeah, correct. There's a couple of things I got to correct on this
Okay.
lineup.
So,
I know.
sorry, I'm a little confused here.
Just I scribbled out.
Okay, so this is an application to reopen and allow re-argument of a case that was dismissed in July for failure to prosecute. To support a case for re-argument under Section 1-12.5 of the Board's Rules of Practice and Procedure, the Board must find in relevant part that 1, substantial new evidence is submitted that was not available at the time of the initial hearing, or 2, there is a material change in plans or circumstances. What I see here and what I remember see here in terms of the applicant counsel submission, and of course, what I remember from the time when we considered dismissing this, is that this was the result of the behavior of an extremely careless and attentive counsel who frankly really should have known better. We dismissed the case because neither the owner nor its counsel appeared at the July hearing nor made any submissions prior to it. And under the most ordinary circumstances, a request to adjourn a hearing is not made by informal email, nor is the board, made up of its 5 commissioners, obliged to accept the request. That's the reason that the applicant is expected to attend the hearing and hear what the board has to say about the request. In this case, both our executive director and our project manager, and I believe counsel, spoke to owner's counsel several times requesting submission of a formal adjournment letter and never received one. My understanding is that council was advised that failure to do this could result in dismissal. Our executive director clearly requested that council attend the July hearing to update the board on progress, and council chose to ignore that request. And my notes from executive session indicate that it was the board's understanding that council would attend the hearing. That counsel for the owner was actually unaware of the board's dismissal underscores the poor representation and prosecution of this case by counsel. Further, until a property owner submits an authorization form, counsel has actually no authority to appear before the board in any form on the owner's behalf, and that form wasn't submitted until late August. So with respect to the notice letter that was sent on May 10th, to the owner advising them of danger of dismissal, if the owner never received it as is claimed, then why was it not returned by the post office to the board? That's kind of very unusual. After all this time, it was sent in May, we certainly would have received it back. And if indeed the owner was unaware of the May 10th letter, was it mere coincidence that the board received a letter from new counsel in mid-June? Sounds like it was a strange coincidence. So I also have to say that the BSA has had this application since May of 2015. In response to October 2015 notice of comments, the applicant took 10 months to respond. And subsequent to its initial hearing in December 2016, there was complete silence from the owners until 7 months later. One could argue that the entire application has been characterized by multiple failures to prosecute. So as to this application to reopening, the changed circumstances, if you want to look at that, appear to be first, that there's a change in the lawyer representing the owner. The actual lawyer who failed to respond to anything, it no longer works at this law firm. But had we been presented with the possibility that the same inattentive lawyer would be prosecuting the case, I would actually be fearful that the board would be faced with similar inattentiveness and unresponsiveness in future submissions, and that the board would be wasting its time here. So I'm looking at the changed circumstances, only that there's new counsel. Not sure that the new counsel has the experience to prosecute this case. It's, this is specialties, right, doing land use law. As to the change in plans, the August submission shows a 2-story reduction in the building height. That is a change in plans. However, I need to state from my perspective and based on what we talked about way back in December at the hearing, that submission was not responsive to the board's comments at that hearing. And if we were to agree to grant this application to reopen, the owner and the owner's counsel need to understand that every one of the board's comments made at both the review session and the hearing, both of which can be viewed on YouTube, must be responded to in writing with a cover letter that goes through each point, and that the scale of the building and the scope of the waivers must be significantly reduced, otherwise it's not responsive to our December comments. Yeah, did you want to add something?
That was reiterated to the applicant.
That was what?
Reiterated to the applicant.
Many
Occasions,
times,
watch
yeah,
the
on
YouTube
multiple
video,
occasions.
it's
So
something.
it's kind of, from my perspective, it's kind of, I'm looking at this as just poor representation, prejudiced the property owner, but then the property owner also needs to get with the program, needs to pay attention, because the application can't be pursued if they themselves are not working with their consultants to come up with a solution that is responsive to what the board's comments were. I'm interested in really what everybody else thinks, because, this is a question to re-argue, and I think we dismissed rightfully.
Well, I am concerned about the sequence of timing and the way information was provided. So I think just looking at that point of view, that gives me some thought in terms of how we handle this case. In terms of new information, yes, there's a reduction in the plan, but we had a lot of new comments, and now we have a new commissioner who are specializing in the engineering part of it. So I do want to hear more from our new commissioner in terms of any insight that can be brought that we need to be aware of. Those being addressed.
But we also can't prosecute the case here, right?
Right,
So this
I
is
agree.
only, do we think, does it answer one or the other question? Are there new plans, new circumstances that would,
What do you mean by new circumstances? Is this like a
Well-
new site condition, new some, because?
yeah, normally it
There
would
has
be
not
that.
been, so that has not been, I don't think anything has been provided that indicates there has been substantial change in the site condition.
But they changed their plans, as I understand.
Yeah, the plans changed by
The-
being
the-
reduced by
yeah.
2 stories.
But that would have happened as part of the,
But it never did, right? So it's
Right.
new.
Right.
okay.
So if you look at the cases that our council provided us with, on other cases where the board had granted the right to reopen, the changes to the drawings were actually, they looked at it and they said, oh, look, the drawings changed from the last time. So that was adequate to reopen. Whether we consider it adequate, because I don't consider that 2-story reduction at all responsive. It was a little bit like a token effort. And it was clear from the December hearings that former council was very uncomfortable with the scale of the project that he was being required by his client to present to us. That's why I think he was so uncomfortable in his presentation, that the building is enormous. And how do you justify that when you get up there and try to explain why this subsurface condition leads to 2 times the FAR and 2 times the unit count and all of that sort of stuff. So, you know.
So while to me, there was no change in terms of the uniqueness finding, because the same issues are present in their argument that were there in the original argument. They did, they did bring the plans down by taking off 2 stories, but they also changed the economics of it by changing it from a market rate condominium to a rental property that now has 30% affordable rentals. And so I'm not sure what kind of an impact that has on the feasibility of the project, whether it is now still just as large an ask as it was originally, or if changing the economics on the income side makes it perhaps less of an ask. That I don't know. But to me, there is a change. And so I would be willing to hear it again.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, in addition to that, I saw a technical report submitted to explain how the site conditions are unique and the sources for the hardship. Although I have too many comments on that technical report, but I believe this technical report is like a new explanation and new document that is available to the board. And I believe we should look at that.
Okay. Okay, all right, fair. Okay, thank you. So I think that sounds like, well, we'll vote on it tomorrow. Right.
Appeals calendar, continued hearings, item number 4, 2016-1186A through 2016-1207A, Hook Creek Boulevard, Queens.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. I still don't see proof of service of the initial application to officials in the file. And the community board was supposed to hold another meeting and issue a revised resolution in September of 2016 after conducting a site visit. That was discussed in their July 2016 resolution, and we asked about that at the last hearing, and I don't know whether the community board updated its point of view, maybe, because it actually never held a full committee meeting on it, or it voted in a way that it thought was premature. So I think I'd like to have us reach out to the community board and find out. We did ask the applicant to respond to that. The applicant submitted a letter from an engineer arguing that the amended drainage plan approval should not be required prior to permitting, but instead prior to TCO. I'm afraid I actually didn't understand the logic in that engineering letter. And my point of view is if DEP hasn't had a chance to weigh in on the amendments to the drainage plan, prior to permitting, then construction can potentially proceed in a manner that's not in the best interest of DEP's overall plan for the area. And I think this is a particular concern here since the area and roadway has a history of flooding. In fact, Commissioner Shanda experienced a drive-through flooding that day, I think. And I note also that the survey shows a large underground culvert on the site, so it's been holding water underneath the site. Obviously, there's drainage problems here, and the idea of not dealing with them up front, I find concerning. I also don't see that this submission was particularly responsive to our comments at the last hearing in August. The site plan doesn't show street or sidewalk widths, lighting, no parking signs, or general compliance with DOT standards. It does show hydrants, that the buildings are sprinklered and street trees, however. So, and also, some of this was made difficult because this is the drawing is a scan. So when you try to zoom in on a scan, there's a lot you can't read.
Right,
So-
we asked them to provide another
Yeah.
Plans for some more detail, more clearer plans.
Yeah, so
we
it
can
should
look at the
always be
dimensions.
provided in PDF form. PDF allows you to keep going down to the tiniest image, and scanning never does. The builder's pavement plan also doesn't indicate any of those same above elements. So that means it's an incomplete pavement plan.
It's draft, right? It's not finalized, that's
It's
my
a draft.
Well, it's a draft, but it's supposed to
It's still-
include what's
right.
required, right? And nor was there a full response to the fire department's comments or notes on the drawings related to involved agency requirements. All the agencies had a lot of comments on the site. We also still don't have DEP sign off. And the drawing appears to indicate that all 28 houses still require GCL waivers. We asked them to use some sort of a coding, and
I think they did. It's not very clear though. It's kind of crossed out, the lots that have been crossed out are not part of the GCL, but there is no legend that goes with it that clearly reads it. So
Okay, I
one has to
didn't even
infer
right.
from the text.
I
But
didn't
you're
even
right,
see
and
the
drawing
cross out, yeah.
It's
Because it actually showed a little legend that showed something was going to happen, a hatching, and then no
Right.
hatching happened. So I'm looking at the legend, I'm looking for the hatching, and there's no hatching. So, and also nothing in the materials addresses the fact that this is a heavily traveled road, as you mentioned, actually, with big trucks that access the warehouses to the rear of the properties. I actually think the road needs to be wider to accommodate the new and existing uses because, and it's a very narrow road. And that they should show on the site plan the street system that surrounds the site to show how existing uses will be accommodated. Because there was a comment at the last hearing in response to this issue of the trucks and the warehouses, that the applicant would look at a looping system for the trucks to go some other way, and nothing was shown. I just have a note that says we will look at looping around.
But that's not their site, so why would we
Well,
even come?
I don't, it's really confusing because it's a very large, the survey shows this really large site being subdivided longitudinally. So you have the warehouses on one side and the residences on the other. So it's not actually clear to me. It seems like the owner of the entire industrial zone subdivided and is selling off. And I believe they're contract vendees. They're not actually, it hasn't closed yet. I'm not sure about that.
I had some comments. I was looking at the revised survey that was provided, and what I noticed was that the survey provided shows the width of Hook Creek from chain link fence from one side of the street to the chain link fence that's on the other side, that is the subject property. It should actually show the, while that's there, it should also show the width from the chain link fence to the property line, because the property line is further east of the chain link fence.
Right.
And the reason I'm saying is that based on that, I think the rough measurement of that street, distance is more than 20 feet. It's somewhere on an average of 30 plus. And the note that is included in the plan says that at a minimum 20-foot width would be, a 20-foot and plus width would be maintained. And goes back to what you're saying is, if the width of Hook Creek from chain link to the property is more than 30 and plus, we should be asking for the width of the street at that to be at least 30, if not 35 foot.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And so they should provide a revised survey with the dimensions from the chain link to the property line. And
I agree. Any other comments? No? Okay.
We also need DOT about no parking.
yes, it,
DOT, I reached out to DOT about if they were okay with no parking. It was part
Right,
of
fire department
department's-
insisted,
Right,
right?
it's part of fire department's condition, and I haven't heard back from DOT
But I would
yet.
say the fire department might have a different attitude if we widen, if the road were wider, right?
it's,
Might, I don't know.
well, 35, it's a two-lane. So you will have
Right.
two moving lanes in each direction with one probably a shoulder. And given that these houses are fronting right on Hook Creek with so many curb cuts, I mean, these are things that we need to talk, DOT needs to weigh in, and where that extra width of 35 foot would be, on east side or on the west side, and therefore the parking signs
Yeah.
should also be determined based on that, no parking sign. I think there should be no parking
No.
on both sides of the
Okay.
street, you just cannot, but
Okay.
that's a DOT determination.
And there's a lot of traffic there, so.
Yeah, this and Francis Louis are the two north-south street on that section of remaining portion of Queens. So it is, these are the two main roads that, and it's well utilized. It takes you to the Merrick Road and the other street, so it's well
It's
utilized.
crazy that
It's not one of the
that's-
local street, it's one
Yeah.
of the local arteries, if you want to upgrade it to that level.
It's crazy that a local artery is so narrow, handling so much traffic.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Okay.
Yep. Item number 5, 2016-4268A, 30 Prince Street, Brooklyn.
They asked to adjourn this.
Yeah, until January.
Right.
Item number 6, sorry. Item number 6, item number 7, and item number 8. 16 and 19 Tuttle, 16 Garage Tuttle Street, and 18 Tuttle Street, Staten Island.
Okay, we received recently, in September 14th, a community board resolution with respect to 18 Tuttle, Lot 92. That's the one that faces onto Homeplace, recommending denial of the application and recommending reorientation of this building to face Homeplace. That's been a theme in reviewing this. The applicant submitted a copy of the 2016 Homeowners Association bylaws and certification of Homeowners Association Incorporation, information on anticipated maintenance costs for roadway asphalt repair, sewer, snow removal, an affidavit from the sponsored developer that apparently was attached to an offering plan. It's not really clear what that was attached to. And a May 2017 letter from the New York State Attorney General's office accepting the Homeowners Association Cooperative Policy Statement treatment, where there's a de minimis cooperative interests, in this case, the roadways, sewers, and et cetera. The December 2016 restrictive declaration that was provided includes the obligation of the homeowners association, or really it's the sponsor through the homeowners association, to maintain the roadways, sewers, water lines, and utilities. I didn't see any mention of sidewalks, street trees, lighting, or signage that are all very much a part of the public roadway system. I think the declaration needs to be amended or an addendum prepared and both recorded against the property. I don't know whether that kind of thing needs to go through the AG's office again, if it's an addendum, maybe a separate document, or whether it has to go through the AG. The builder's pavement plan provided unless I missed something, is only for the Homeplace fronting houses. There's no builder's pavement plan for Tuttle, and I know that DOT doesn't officially control private roads, but nevertheless, the roads need to comply with DOT standards, so there should be a pavement plan prepared that uses all of the same standards. The revised site plan continues to force pedestrians into Tuttle Street around the bushes that are located where the sidewalk should be. The bushes are labeled required screening under section 26-35 of the zoning resolution. The fact that it's laid out like that just tells me that the design isn't worked out. It doesn't mean that you don't have to screen the adjoining zoning lots, but you can't put the bushes on the sidewalk. And you can't force pedestrians into an active roadway, especially when you look at the maneuverability drawing that shows how the cars have to back out in order to get going onto Tuttle Street. Every one of them hits a pedestrian that's walking in the street to get around the bushes. So, and on the Tuttle Street cul-de-sac, only small areas are denoted as no parking zones. I don't see how there could be any parking along the curbs if fire department is using that as some kind of a turnaround or staging area. Fire department in July actually had problems with this application. The applicant kind of represents that the fire department was fine with it, but actually it was the opposite. They said that they want there to be frontage of that 18 Tuttle on Homeplace, not on Tuttle. They say, fire department recommends that the application be approved, provided the building fronts on Homeplace, since when fully open will provide access for emergency vehicles from either direction with less possibility that fire operations would be delayed due to the restricted layout of the segment of Tuttle Street proposed as the main access to the building. So it wants the main access to the building to be Homeplace. Community board wants it to be Homeplace. Borough president wants it to be Homeplace. I agree. I think it's a really bad urban.
I think they're using this argument of the zoning text for it to be a private road, you need to have 3 or more building or building segment located beyond 50 feet, of the street line or street setback line. My question is, when you say it has to be 3 or more buildings located, does it have to front? It can be on it, right? It doesn't have, does it have, so that's one question I have. And the other thing is that going back to the concerns that's been raised by that building fronting on Homeplace, the yard regulation that they have cited, I mean, if you put the 30-foot yard on Tuttle, and that's fine.
Right.
And the regulation requires that a 30-foot front yard adjoins a street, and such yard, so 30-foot can be on Homeplace, that's a street, and that such yard then, but if you make it Tuttle, then that would work too.
Exactly right. It just says if it's a through lot from street to street, because
Right.
Tuttle's considered a street now,
Right.
then you need one 30-foot front yard.
Right.
It doesn't tell you which side it has to be on.
Right.
So, yeah, so I didn't understand that, and now you can move the building forward and you comply because you still have 10 feet
Yeah.
back of Homeplace.
Yeah.
And then the building fronts the right way, and I still think it complies as a private road, I agree with you.
Right.
And then, because this idea that you're putting this dense shrubs along the front, which eventually will grow into something that's impenetrable, because that's the goal, right? Makes it inaccessible to the fire department and really, really bad urbanism, so.
I also had some concerns about the HOA. It wasn't clear from the HOA if it indicates who is going to maintain and upkeep all the screening that's being proposed along Tuttle, because that's zoning requirement. And so will that fall under the HOA or would that fall under individual homeowners? Because it's not, it doesn't seem like it's on this individual tax
No,
lots.
you're right.
It's on the street, it's not on the tax lot, it's somewhere else. But, so who is maintaining it?
Well, the
That-
tax lots extend into this, that's the part, this, so they have a homeowners association because the portion of the tax lot into which Tuttle falls becomes the common
But
property.
that section is the common property, and
Yes,
I think,
correct.
and that's not very clear as to who would be responsible for maintaining it, so my
Okay,
sense.
I agree with you.
And that should be very clearly.
So in
mentioned.
addition to amending the declaration and the homeowners association agreement, I guess, to include the landscaping, that's the official public landscaping,
Yes.
right? So, the landscape.
And if I would like FDNY to clarify this, and I think we are thinking along the same line, that is, if there is no fencing provided or landscaping provided on Tuttle, on Homeplace, then FDNY would be fine with it. And if that's the case, that should be part of the condition of whoever owns that through lot fronting Tuttle and Home, that they cannot put a fence or, right?
Well, that would be the front door.
That would be the front, but even if, let's say, they provided some fencing later on.
That's something we need to talk to the fire department about, because that's the other part, the fire department always comes to places with like hatchets. But, so people do have fences on their properties, and there's no restriction on that.
But they stated that, so that's why I just wanted to
I
clarify.
think that's
I think
the
it's
main
because of-
access.
Right,
It's the
because
main-
they thought that the home was going to be flipped, so that
Yes.
it's fronting on
Okay.
Tuttle, so then
If they
that
flip it
was
the other
their
way around, then there
concern.
could be less of an issue.
I think so, because then they pull up to it
I
just
would
like they
still
would
think-
pull up to any other home on
I
the
would still
block.
think this particular house should not have a fence on either side. Or if, let's say, you have to access it from Tuttle or from Homeplace, you should allow for that.
But I think that in the subject of fences, fire department, normally there's a little gate that opens and you walk down your garden path, right? And there's the driveway that either has a gate or doesn't have a gate, but they're both operable. So the fire
Okay.
department
So then.
swings open the gate and charges in, or
Okay.
maybe drives the truck and crashes through the fence.
Exactly. The
Okay.
fire department
Okay.
actually was up and testifying once that they will access a fire if they have to ram right through a fence
Okay.
Yes.
and pull right up to the front
Okay.
door.
Okay.
That was not an issue for them,
So the-
whether or
I
not
think
there was a
the
fence.
bigger issue is whether they have to drive through trees and
Right.
dense
Got it.
shrubs. That you don't do with a fire truck. I think you do that with, a tank.
Right, I had a question about the private road, and it says it needed to be accessed by at least 3 homes. So if the home was facing home, that third home, and had its backyard on Tuttle, but had a driveway that went to its parking pad on the side, would that count as being accessed by Tuttle and still having the orientation towards home?
I think it just says 3 or more buildings located.
Yeah, it doesn't say
So it
access.
Located
doesn't have to-
wholly
Right.
beyond 50 feet of a street line or
Right.
street set. That's all. They just have to be located. It doesn't say
It
access.
doesn't specify access or front, none of those terms are used, it just says located.
It says, it
That's
says,
the
a
language.
private road is a right-of-way other than a street that provides vehicular access from a street to 5 or more dwellings that are within building, or 3, you get 3 also. So it provides access.
Access.
That's not the same thing as front door versus back door, as long as there's access.
Right, so could the access be in the form of a driveway that just goes to the side pad,
Right.
right?
Why not, right?
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, if you just think about all the houses in Queens that have the little service roads behind them, that's their vehicular access point, but the front door faces the street, right? So,
Architect is coming tomorrow, so.
yeah. But I think there's sort of universal agreement, not just among us, but community board, borough president, fire department, really everybody who's weighing in, that built one house turning its back on Homeplace is a terrible idea for lots of different reasons. So, Okay. Let me see, I also had some more comments. So there were also DOT comments. DOT said, this is an email to Tony from DOT. DOT does not have comments on Tuttle Street, however, Unit 4 on Homeplace must be improved per the builder's pavement plan requirements. The improvement of the right-of-way on Homeplace must be reflected on the pavement plan once filed, right? And then,
There was another comment that came in.
what? There was another comment? The second comment is, please make sure the applicant shows the improvements to the roadway, that one? DOT recommends Homeplace should at least be opened on its western end. I thought it was going to be open on
I was
both
kind of
ends.
confused with that too, but they're going to look at that.
Okay. I
Yeah.
thought it's being opened all the way,
I think there's some portion that's,
not being open.
the
Okay.
architect will explain it tomorrow.
Okay. And then let me see. Oh, should show street lighting on the plan and the builder's pavement plan. Should show, and then I was going through, like Commissioner Shanda was, through all the rules that apply to the private road. They need to show compliance with private road curb cut spacing requirements, which I'm not sure it does comply with minimum 3-foot curb planting strip widths, and in this case, a minimum 5-foot sidewalk width so that there's continuity with the existing sidewalk. The zoning resolution doesn't require it to be as wide as that, but here there's a 5-foot sidewalk. They need to show compliance with side yard regulations, in particular with section 23-461C, which has to do with the spacing between buildings. I'm also really confused by the property ownership. The current tax map actually doesn't assign tax lot numbers to a portion of the property fronting on Homeplace that's adjacent to tax lot 91 or opposite lot 300 that fronts on Tuttle. So it's kind of like, the tax map shows nobody that owns those lots, or the city owns those lots, or not clear what that is. So is that a ULURP action? Is that a conveyance of city-owned land? How can it not have a tax map number? They provided us with an RP 604 that shows the ideal tax lot numbers, but that's just theoretical if you don't own the land, or can't own the land without a ULURP action. So that was very confusing. And I think those were my comments. Anybody else on this? Interesting problem. Okay.
Go. Zoning calendar decision item number 9, 317-14BZ, 3780-3860 North Strand Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. The applicant submitted photos showing installation of the fencing, guardrail, signage, and general sprucing up of the rear. And Commissioner Shanda asked them to add another plan, which I think is very helpful, that shows where the signage is and notes where the guardrails are and everything like that, so it's all on one drawing.
I just want to add to that, this was very helpful, the revised information. I though would also, the last submission that was submitted, it also included the guardrails and the details, if that can be added to the complete package.
Oh, I thought the complete package was submitted, wasn't it? With this?
It did not include the last submission, which were some of the specs.
Yeah.
So that just can be added to this,
Yeah,
and that would.
right,
be
and then we'll put it
complete.
together
Yeah.
in one pot.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody?
No, otherwise,
Else on
it
this?
looks good.
Yeah, and there is 1 hour free parking for the patrons, that's good.
And I hope they will let all the store owners know for their tenant, for their
Yeah,
patrons to use that 1 hour.
right, that's the thing,
much
is how
as
you
they
get the
can.
word out.
Yeah.
Because I'd be curious in a year if there's any change in use of that parking garage. If word's out that there's 1 hour free parking.
But the guardrail, and that looks
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
Very well done.
But actually, we went and tried to drive down this little thing. It's incredibly tight. It's like amazing to me that anybody is actually able to get in there and park and then get out. I mean, getting in and staying is one thing. What?
This is where we got to.
Yeah, this is backing out where there's a truck ahead of us, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Item number 10, 4-15BZ, this is not a decision case, this is a
Right.
mistake, I apologize.
Yes.
119 Webster Avenue, do you still want to discuss it on this?
No, let's do it
Okay, fine.
later. Let's do it later because it's confusing otherwise.
Item number 11, 2016 4136BZ and 2016 4137BZ, this is 49th Street in Queens.
They provided a letter from the parking consultant stating, am I right? That's 49th Street?
Yeah.
Okay, stating there is no room to add additional parking spaces on site. And this parking analysis showed that parking demand was much higher. That's just more of a reminder because the parking analysis was submitted last time. Shows that the demand was much higher than what is being provided on site and exceeds what the zoning resolution requires. So with peak demand based on the revised use, that they increased the amount of office space, there's 83 to 114 spaces demand and a parking supply of only 64 spaces, so that's a very large shortfall, putting all that shortfall on the street. The problem with this site, though, is that the allowable uses, given the existing floor area for this purpose-built building, are limited, and that medical offices and commercial offices have high parking demands. I'm concerned, though, about deviating from board policy, which looks to ensure that on-site or off-site, off-street, off-site parking is provided to meet the demand. So normally, when we have a situation like this, we ask them to find a lot someplace else.
Right, but there are 360 spaces
Yeah.
on street during
Right.
this time within a quarter mile. So I
Right.
don't think that that's necessary, because
Okay.
within a quarter mile, they can more than satisfy their demand.
So I think somehow or other, we need to phrase this in a way that indicates that it's an unusual situation, because I'm afraid that subsequent applicants will come and say, hey, look what you did with those guys. My overage is only 20 spaces, so how come, and you let those guys do it when the overage was much more than that? So there needs to be a way of really distinguishing this one so it doesn't open any doors, I think. And so the applicant needs to get us there, because I'm kind of uncomfortable with everybody in the future coming and saying, I don't want to meet demand on site. Because in this case, they put double stackers and they stuffed them into the building. And they even looked at putting triple stackers and realized that they couldn't do it, right? And so, and the building's already built, it was built to be a house of worship and then never was occupied for that. So it's kind of, it's in a very unusual situation. And I hope it stays that unique, unusual, singular situation. Okay.
Item number 12, 2016 4334BZ, 341 Nevin Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. They updated the information on on-street parking supply and parking regulations on the study date were provided, which is at analytical disadvantage. Oops, I'm reading the wrong one. I'm sorry. The only thing that was missing, we had the seeker,
Sign-offs.
So
And
we
they
have
the
seeker
design,
sign-offs.
And we also have the WRP sign-off. and-
right? And LPC decided there's no action that's related to this. And, sorry, anything else? That was it, right?
No.
I was just reading the wrong day. Okay.
Item number 13, 2017 53BZ, 24 West 25th Street. This is the legalization of PCE.
Right. So we have proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, but I actually didn't find proof of service of the initial application to officials, even though the community board weighed in. Community board waived their recommendation. We have one letter in support. The applicant provided photos showing sprinklers and alarms installed and building information system printouts of applications for their installation, but no proof of completion of sign-off. So I think we really need the fire department to comment on this one, because there isn't proof of completion of sign-off at the Department of Buildings, so that sounds like it
So
wasn't
we're
even
reopening
done.
this?
Sorry?
Are we reopening this?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I'm doing it again. I'm reading the wrong one. When
You were
you,
thrown off base by the other case, sorry.
yes, because you said this is a legalization, and then I'm like, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong one. They did provide a copy of the fire department fire alarm inspection, request dated 10/4/17, so we're good.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Okay.
Move on? Mm-hmm. Item number 14, 2017-60BZ, 111 Barrow Street, Manhattan. Is that Dave
This,
Pearson?
this one, we're waiting for a DEP sign-off, which maybe we'll get.
Right, well, DEP requested indoor air testing.
Right.
And we notified the applicant, and they sent on Friday evening a work plan that has to do
Okay.
the testing. So
Great.
that has to be approved by DEP, and then they could do the testing.
Okay, so I know the applicant is concerned about getting a decision on this, so, and because the only thing we're waiting for is a DEP review, we can schedule this for, immediate hearings.
What about WRP? Did we get the sign off from WRP?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Continued hearing, item number, do you want to go, item number 10? 4-15BZ, 119 Webster Street, Brooklyn.
Webster Avenue.
Sorry, Webster Avenue? Sorry, Webster Avenue.
Okay.
It's getting cold in here.
Okay. So, at the last hearing, we discussed at extreme length that a solution relocating the interior stair to comply with code requirements should be explored. We also said that a code-compliant exterior stair should be designed and presented, and that the board would consider the two approaches. The applicant provided renderings of an open exterior stair that I don't actually see how it complies with fire code, even though it says it does, and an enclosed exterior stair that I think is far too massive in the front yard. With the open stair, I seem to remember early on in this, the fire department stating at an earlier hearing that it had to be enclosed, and this one is kind of like a fancy fire escape, and fire escapes, I'm not sure that they're allowed to be built anymore, these kind of open tower fire stairs. So that's not for us to decide, that's for Department of Buildings and Fire Department to decide whether that's allowable. The applicant also provided floor plans showing a relocated stair that I actually think could work well enough to meet the programmatic needs. Since an area on those plans is labeled gathering area, while there isn't such a gathering area on the plans that have the exterior stair, in fact, they're quite tight, where you have to pass through these really tight sort of foyers between, and walk through the staircase in order to get to the other side. So it seems to me that if you tighten up that area, you could increase the classroom size, that's the narrow classroom, to 400 square feet. And again, I tried it, and I was able to get a 400 square foot classroom and move the toilets around and even get a little office out of it. So I actually think you could accomplish that. But if the exterior staircase that's open is allowable under code, and the other commissioners are okay with it, then I would want to understand a little bit more. So one is, what's the material of the side yard stair? That's not specified. It needs to be finished brick and not concrete block, because it's rendered like it's concrete block, which would be terrible. Also, there's this material that's described as 2-hour fire separation wall on the open stair along Webster. That needs to be brick. It's not clear what it is because it's not labeled on the drawings, though there's a rendering that implies it's brick. We also asked for more information about the use of the classrooms and lunchroom. The plans are now labeled showing the age groups in each room, so it's one class per grade. And the lunchroom is described as doubling as play space. maybe this is different from Driggs, which was a nursery school, right? So now you have older kids, and older kids clearly wouldn't be able to just be locked up in their rooms all day without having a place to go when it's cold, and there's no outdoor space. Well, there's rooftop space.
So the play space, the lunchroom will serve
Double.
as a play space during inclement weather.
Correct,
That's my understanding.
right. So I understand why that can't become a classroom if they need it for kids to run around. Council also cites to the religious and educational deference cases to argue that the board does not have the authority to modify the design of the project to respond to neighborhood character concerns. On the contrary, the courts have held that the deference cases prevent the board from denying an application for an educational or religious use unless the use will have a substantive impact on health or welfare of the public. That's denying the application. However, this does not prevent the board, and the courts have supported this, does not prevent the board from shaping the project in the interest of the community and finding alternative solutions that result in similar outcomes for the institution. So careful when you waive the deference standard at us. Know your case law. Any other comment?
The bus parking lease that they gave to us seems to be a month-to-month lease, and that's problematic,
Yeah.
because that could just terminate right after the grant.
So it needs to be a permanent relationship, right?
And I also have some question about this is becoming my pet peeve with regards to the parking zone for buses. I believe the buses are going to be there only during pickup and for drop-off. So is there any way to ensure that the parking zone, the no parking zone, is only for those pickups and drop-off and not for the entire duration of the school from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m.? That,
Right. Well, the only way to do that is just to have it a no parking bus loading zone between specific hours. And then, you know, police or whatever
yeah, I'm not sure what.
they
what
give
are the
tickets if you
yeah.
park during, I mean, that's typical alternate side of the street parking. You know that you have to leave at a certain time or you get a ticket, right? So we see this in a lot of the schools where they get 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. no parking zones. That's not right. It's 7 a.m. to whatever, 10. And then it should be
2 to 4 or
2 to
whatever.
4 or whatever, right? And so in the middle of the day, you should be allowed to park there, right? I agree, yeah. Yeah, okay. Anything else? No? Okay, go.
Item number 15, 17414BZ, 820 East 182nd Street, the Bronx.
Okay, this one, we've had a lot of adjournments, and we know and we said at the last hearing that the case would be dismissed if no one appeared, and no one, we said in August that at the next hearing, the case would be dismissed if no one responded to us for this hearing. I know that Carlo reached out to the applicant. Were you able to reach out to the owner?
No, I sent an email to the applicant's representatives and stated that an adjournment would not be granted.
Right.
And that they, along with the property owners, should attend this hearing. And I have not received a response as of Friday. I don't know today. I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay, I'm just thinking, if you go to the owner's authorization form, because again, this might be a case of poor representation, and I hate the idea that the owner is prejudiced because their counsel or architect, whatever, are doing a bad job, or may just not even be working anymore. I mean, that's the other thing. You close your business and you don't let anybody know. That happens, right? So I think if it's possible to look at the owner's authorization form and reach out directly to the owner. And the main reason that I'm concerned about this is our dismissal of this renders an existing use that was approved way back in the day, illegal. And so then Department of Buildings will be given information that the use is now no longer permitted, and they could be shutting down a going business, which is really not, from a public policy perspective, what we want to do. The owner may be completely unaware that this is happening. It wouldn't be the first time where counsel doesn't tell their client what's going on.
Yeah, if it's okay, depending on what occurs tomorrow, we were going to send out a certified mailing to both the applicant's representative and the property owners. I don't know what
But
the
it's
board.
gonna, it might be dismissed tomorrow.
Yeah, it could be
That's the
dismissed
problem.
tomorrow, so that's why
Right.
the owner you should attempt to contact the owner today, because we gave that warning a month, in August. This is your last chance, it will be dismissed. So we can't say this is your last chance, it will be
Yeah.
dismissed after this was your last, right? And I just want to make sure that the owners had an opportunity to be contacted, okay? Okay.
Come on. Item number 16, 30214BZ, 45-04 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, plans were revised that to address some of the board's comments. Yeah, you have a lot of comments, too. Okay. So we have a new letter from the Auburndale Association expressing concerns about the parking, pedestrian safety at the bus stop, and the building appearance. They suggested a parking monitor be present on the site to manage patient and staff parking, which is a good idea. Though an extremely tight layout with very small exam rooms. It appears to comply with the ADA requirements, which is one of the things that we asked them to do. DOB, of course, will need to verify that. They should add a note to the plans to that effect, that DOB needs to verify ADA compliance. The community board was concerned about the scale of the operation and the parking impacts. This has not been addressed by the applicant. They're really cramming in those exam rooms, and it turns out this is a spec development, so they're kind of assuming that if any doctors are interested in being tenants, they want to be crammed into this place. I'm not sure that that's an accurate assumption. There are only 10 parking spaces, and 2 are in tandem. R3 regulations require 1 space per 400 square feet, so they comply with that, except that the parking is being calculated only based on the new floor area, which is what the zoning resolution confusingly requires. So it's clear that there won't be adequate parking for the existing building that's being converted to this use. So the building will have 19 exam rooms and 4 offices. So I don't see how there'll be any spaces left for patients, since there will be at least 4 receptionists, according to the plan. There's a receptionist on each side of the building, on each floor, and 5 doctors, because there are 5 offices. And always, there are nurses and assistants associated with these. So we exceeded already the parking spaces. So I actually think this is an issue that goes to the findings about whether the site can handle this use. Further, I don't believe we ever received a response to our concern that too much open space is being covered by parking, and we wanted open space calculations shown on the plans. Open space being adequate and contextual is an essential finding for this special permit, and it's actually never been addressed. There's a certain maximum of open space that can be covered by parking, and I think this could be exceeding the maximum. And while the applicant did eliminate one point of entry from 45th Road, we also directed the applicant to reorient the porch stair to encourage access only from Francis Lewis, and that wasn't done. The fire stairs on the side of the building aren't shown on the site plan, and they need to be, as should the porch on the 45th Street frontage. Access from one side of the building to the other is through the fire stairs. It still is. We mentioned this at the last hearing, and I don't know whether DOB will be okay with that, so DOB needs to verify that's an acceptable condition.
Given that we are facing this issue with Webster,
Yes,
I'll be curious to find out what DOB says on this.
right. Yeah, I don't understand how you can effectively clog the fire stair. You know, you could have a wheelchair in the middle of the fire stair at the time that the fire breaks out. You know, or a stretcher, or who knows what they're using the fire stair for. And as noted at the prior hearing, although there is a level difference from one side of the building to the other, there's no ramp shown. There's a big level difference. It's like 1.5 feet or maybe more, right? And I don't understand why there's a level difference, because it's new construction. So why don't you just level it with the adjacent building? But the only place that the ramp could be located is in the fire stair, and that can't be legal. For sure, that's not legal. Or you put the ramp in one of the waiting areas, in which case you can't sit on a chair because your chair is on a slope. You're sitting there at 1 in 12 or 1 in... So we also asked that plans make clear the existing walls to remain versus the new walls, which they didn't do, and that the BSA zoning calculation sheet be corrected to reflect the project and the waivers requested. It says basically that it's in full compliance, and if it were, they wouldn't be here. I personally agree with the Auburndale Association that the 45th Road front facade needs cohesiveness and continuity of materials and style. The project needs to be respectful of neighborhood character. It's clear it's a spec building because there's sort of no pride of place in the design of the building. The bus stop sign is adjacent to the curb cut, and BSA takes no position on whether the curb cut location will be acceptable to DOT. We talked about this before, that there are curb cuts in bus stops, but maybe those are old curb cuts. I don't know. Do they allow new curb cuts in bus stops? I actually have no idea. Landscaping drawings must be provided to show number, type, and spacing of planting. That must be shrubs at least 4 feet high at the edges, higher adjacent to the building, and the parking areas, and ground cover as fill, and high hedges along the residential property line. Grass is not an acceptable shielding material unless you're a very small insect. And we and the community board were clear that the parking area has to be shielded by planting, and that curbs all the way around the planting area must be installed to ensure that planting isn't replaced with parking. We also wanted information on the fencing that we didn't receive. It must be of a residential type opaque picket, not chain link with plastic slatting. And I'm actually very concerned about the impact of the parking area on the adjacent residential property that faces Francis Lewis, because it doesn't have the benefit of any screening, right, other than a fence. And so not only is it unsightly, they're going to be dealing with the noise of the parking. And based on that other application that we have where they're asking for a variance for more parking, right, to extend onto the adjoining lot, where it's sort of bedlam on that parking lot, right? So all day long, the cars are triple parking and all that. So you know that there's going to be far more than only 9 cars parking on this lot, right? I think this is the 4th hearing on the application, and the board has given the applicant ample time to respond to our concerns. So I actually think this should be our last hearing on this one, and we decide what we decide based on what the applicant tells us tomorrow.
So you have picked up on my concerns, and I want to add to it is that I also wanted the plans to indicate there was a low wall that was placed against the edges of the parking, for the same reason that we don't want the creeping of the cars parking into the hedges, and then the hedges disappear and more parking spaces get formed. So that needs to be very clearly indicated in the drawing, in addition to the hedges that are going to be provided to shield the parking space along the Francis and also 45th.
So it's like an 18-inch wall or something? What are we,
Yeah,
2 foot, 2
Yeah,
foot wall?
I think. And then the hedges can be above that, so you have a very well screened parking space, and you ensure that the parking remains contained
Right.
in that specified area. I also think there's a way to allow for a little bit more greening along the side lot line along Francis Lewis and the residential You can move the curb cut a little bit away from the edge of the property line and allow for some greening, like vines that can grow along the fence, along a rear. That could be an additional precaution. I have concerns about the signage that is being proposed along 45th. The building, the plan shows, the elevation shows there will be a signage on 45th. We shouldn't have any signage on 45th. If anything, it should be at a minimum, at a maximum, just like a pylon kind of thing on Francis Lewis Boulevard, which of some size dimensions that would be specified, and that should be it. There should be nothing on 45th that indicates that this is a medical facility.
Yeah, like we've seen those also, where it's a pylon and the doctor's names
Yeah.
slide in and out as they
Right.
change, right?
And there's enough green space at that corner of Francis Lewis that one can be provided.
Any other comment?
And we have not heard about the street trees. I'm not convinced that street trees that are indicated on Francis Lewis would meet DOT requirement.
Because they're too close to,
Yeah, they're within 50 feet and of the intersection, and the next tree is within 25 feet of the other one.
any other comment?
I agree that they need to specify what type of plantings are on the eastern and southern portion of the lot, because it just says new planting. And I had raised the concern about that western lot line and having some kind of screening or landscaping so that the home to the west of it would be appropriately isolated from the noise of the parking. And so it just seemed to me like their response was, well, we can't put a planting strip here, probably because of the parking layout, but maybe they need to explore valet parking then, if the layout is so tight, and move off of that lot line.
Yeah. But no matter what, with valet parking, they're not going to get that many spaces, right?
Right, but they may not get that many more spaces, but what they at least could do is then put more landscaping in
Yeah.
on that western lot line, which would increase the overall percentage of the lot that's landscaped,
Right.
which would then meet the findings of kind of matching up with the character of the rest of the homes in the neighborhood.
Nope.
Item number 17, 15715BZ, 3925 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 18, 2016-3BZ, 1212 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay, we have a very strong letter of opposition from Borough President Otto, citing traffic and safety concerns, as well as the impact on street widening. The applicant needs to respond to these concerns very carefully. At the June 6th hearing, we expressed concerns about the maneuverability diagram that showed use of the area within the widening, the street widening, for turnarounds. No revision to that diagram was provided. There is a new truck turnaround diagram that I absolutely didn't understand. It looks like the truck flies over the building, or I just didn't understand what this is kind of strange arc thing that derives from the far corner of the lot that's not near this road. I just think it was a mistake, like a CAD glitch or something. I just can't figure out what it was. We also discussed eliminating diesel to reduce truck traffic on this quiet street. The applicant responded with a study by the Fuel Institute that argues the need for more diesel in the future.
This is the first time I'm hearing that
Right.
there's
Yeah.
a demand for it.
And then, though, if you look at the report even further, though, the vast majority of the diesel-driven vehicles are trucks, both now and into the future.
Okay.
So,
But
you
in
know, that
addition
kind
to
of
that,
diminishes their point.
yeah, In addition to that, the report was written in 2013, and if you've been reading the news at all, in Europe, which has been using diesel in cars for decades, it's no longer okay. In Spain, Italy, Germany, lots of places, they are eliminating the use of diesel in cars. Why? Because they produce nitrogen oxide emissions, which we're actually learning a lot about nitrogen oxide. And so I don't think for lots of reasons they've made their case for diesel on the site. The applicant didn't respond to our earlier questions about the need for so many curb cuts on Victory, especially since the circulation diagram appears to depend on Seneca access and Victory egress. I don't see how you actually get on and off without using the widening.
My question here is that has DOT reviewed this? Because this is going to be a street widening, though DOT in its street widening has left the existing curb cuts as is, that's assuming the existing use. I don't know if DOT has considered this in light of this action that is before us. And I definitely think we should get DOT to opine on it in terms of whether a curb cut that is going to be used by trucks, by vehicles coming in and out, or is that acceptable, given that this is going to become our only right turn lane?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, we did this on the gas station on Fordham Road. DOT played a major part in our understanding of the situation, right? So I agree with that. But I also have absolutely no idea why they need so many curb cuts on, right on Victory. I don't actually see how you use them. They've not shown once the kind of legitimate use of the Victory curb cuts, except going from Seneca onto Victory. Otherwise, you're cutting across on the wrong side of the road, and then how do you get off? Then you're leaving from Seneca, right?
Yeah.
So, with respect to pedestrians, with respect to pedestrian safety concerns, a pedestrian count survey was conducted, but I note that it was conducted during the week of July 4th. So it may not actually be representative of a busy work week. It's unclear whether the use of the parks would have been heavier or lighter during that period. So that might have been, you can't really analyze, do more people go away in this neighborhood or do they use the park? It showed relatively few pedestrian trips at peak morning, afternoon, and evening hours on the sidewalks in front of the site, although there apparently was road work on Seneca at the time of the study, so pedestrian activity may have been reduced. The main access to the parks, however, does appear to be along the north side of Victory. The study didn't address access to the ball field that's on the south side of Victory between Seneca and Ontario, but they did provide an area map that shows this fence that goes around
Right, the entrance is from Ontario.
Ontario, but you still have to get there, so how do you get there? I mean, just because you have to walk down Ontario doesn't mean you don't walk on Victory to get there. So that I'm not sure that was so revealing. We also asked for planting along the Seneca frontage of the building, which they didn't do. They put one little tiny bush.
And it doesn't meet the lower density growth management screening requirement of 3721.
3721.
Yeah.
And also that the perimeter fence, we asked, be placed atop a 4-foot-high brick wall. That was another thing that we had said. They provided a drawing showing they're going to use an aluminum picket, but we had said that we wanted it on top of a brick wall. The community board had similar requests, some of which were responded to. So they said, remove the small curb cut on Seneca at the rear of the property, which they did. Provide planting along the building on Seneca, which is what we're talking about now. Provide higher curbs along the perimeter. request the DOT extend the right turn lane from Clove Road along Victory to Seneca. That's one way that they're suggesting will improve the traffic situation, and the applicant hasn't gotten into any of those kinds of proposals. Provide adequate distance for large Seneca Avenue curb cut from 88 corner ramps on Victory. They didn't dimension that on the plans, and I don't know what adequate distance means, but obviously you don't want to have a conflict between somebody who is using the ramp for accessibility and a car that's turning. And so they should show that they've studied that. And they should reduce the height of the proposed sign from 38 to 20 feet, which they did do. So while I'm concerned about the conflict between the curb cuts, traffic, and pedestrian flow, I note here that commercial use is as of right, and that there are adjacent convenience store uses with parking lots. However, as I stated at an earlier hearing, the convenience store in this case would be allowed as a standalone as of right, but would require 24 parking spaces. And in this case, treated as an accessory, it only has 7 spaces, only 5 of which are required because it's accessory, right? So I'm concerned actually that this is kind of a workaround having more parking spaces, because it's common in this neighborhood to have a convenience type store with a lot of parking, so just down the street, right? So I am concerned that this arguably brings a lot more traffic to the site and nowhere to put the cars. So any other comments?
I had some comments, and that was with regards to the location of where the pumps are placed as proposed. The plan says they'll be located 14 feet from the widening line. I want to make sure that widening line means, does it include the sidewalk, or does it not include it's 14 feet from the sidewalk or 14 feet from the curb?
It looks like it's from the sidewalk and not the curb.
Okay, so that's then good.
Okay.
But then
They measure?
it's just, that's the widening line, and it says 14 feet, so that's the sidewalk. Then my concern is the location of the underground fuel tank where it's placed. It would be well into the sidewalk then.
No, isn't the
No.
sidewalk?
So-
Look, the sidewalk's up here.
No, that's the street widening
the
line.
street
That's the
wide.
street widening, so the street
But that-
would
No,
come.
this is the sidewalk, the curb cuts right here.
That's
Should
the
be
existing
sidewalk.
condition, no, that's the existing condition. So the street widening would be, that's the street widening, and this is the sidewalk.
The street
The
widening
sidewalk
includes
is
the
little.
sidewalk.
Right.
The street
So-
widening goes to the property line,
Right.
right? So the
So-
sidewalk would be above,
It
The
should be
widening
above
line.
that. So
Right.
then, my question is, this distance of 14 feet should be from the sidewalk
From the
and
edge of
not
the
from
sidewalk.
the edge of the sidewalk. So that's
Right.
one comment. The other thing is the location of the underground tank. In this case, if this is the where the street widening is, the underground tank is right under that street widening. This will compromise any construction, any repair that city would have to do at somewhere down the road, especially if you have an underground tank
they're
right
not
abutting
under
this.
they're at the edge of the widening line. So
But this-
because the sidewalk, when
Is
they
on
say
the
a
other
street
side.
widening and it's 60 feet from property line to property line, that includes the sidewalks, right?
Understood, but this is touching exactly the.
Yeah, it touches it.
Touches
right.
it. I really, this
Yeah.
concerns me with regards to, if any in future, any construction repair that has to happen, how this is going to affect. So the underground tank has to be relocated away from this widening line.
Okay.
Then I had some questions in.
Well, that's fair, because sometimes they put underground sewer system, they dig underneath the sidewalk sometimes to run other stuff. So
There
they
should
have
be some
access to
distance
it.
that should be
Yeah,
maintained.
there should be a distance. There's probably a rule about the distance, and the fact that the tanks are located where they are so far away from the property line, perhaps is because they need to be 10 feet away from the property line, something like that. property line when you think there's a street,
Right.
right? Not when there's a future street that's
Right.
condemned.
Right.
Right. So we need I guess that's a DOT question again, so that's a DOT needs to comment on that.
Then I had a question regarding the finding of 73211 that says the site of such use has a minimum area of 7,500 square feet. I think it meets it, but the way it has been measured, it's not correct. Since the site is not a defined term, and the use in this case is, the minimum area should be based on the total lot area excluding the land and streets. And that's not how the document is represented on the plan, so that needs to be corrected.
Madam Vice Chair, I believe that the reading of that is that that's in determining the widest length of the zoning district.
No, that's the part two. I'm talking about the part two part of it. The first part,
With
yes.
the land
lot
and
area.
streets,
Yeah.
yeah, so it excludes that.
So, but the statement of fact has not incorporated, it's including the entire property line.
It sounds like it may be confusing two parts of the requirement, so it's one,
No.
it's that the,
No,
No, I think she's saying in their statement of facts, they're including the area
Yeah.
within street widening lines, whereas the special permit text requires that you omit
exclude.
the area.
admit-
They
And-
should, they
and
should
in-
clarify
They
the
should just
dimension of
clarify
the
that.
the area of the
And
lot.
that should be stated in the statement of fact and in the plans
Big-
recorded.
And in particular, that land has already been condemned.
Right,
So,
that's a good point.
yeah.
The
so
widening line
The
area.
widening
Right.
area has already been condemned, so that's not actually owned by this property owner,
So
right?
that needs to be
Yeah,
revised, that's a
so-
good point, yeah. And similarly, when you're referring to the frontage of the commercial overlay extending along Victory Boulevard, it needs to, again, like, as you said, subtract all street widening, so it also needs to subtract the street widening of the Seneca Street, which it has not.
it has to be contiguous of at least 300.
Right, so that needs to be corrected. And I think they still would meet the requirement, but we just need to be consistent, and sometimes those get overlooked.
That's good.
And the lumen spread diagram is incomplete, we
Yeah.
don't have any understanding of.
They just said we'll put shields on, yeah,
No, but we typically look for the
Right.
number and the spreads.
right. Okay. Any other comments? No? That's a lot.
Item number 19, 2016-4179BZ, 1462 62nd Street, Brooklyn. This is being adjourned
Yeah,
to
adjourned.
November 14th. Item number 20, 2016-4181BZ, 1981 East 14th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, we got a threshold question here about retention of 50% of perimeter walls and joists. The plans were revised to retain a little more of the existing walls at the second floor. Unfortunately, there's a little bit in the shower that's frankly not believable, nor is the tiny section all by itself in the attic. Retention of roof beams doesn't count to retention of floor area, so shouldn't have been shown on the floor plans as being retained. Surface area calculations for the building code are not the same as floor area calculations. They show always, this particular architect often shows us those surface area calcs that are required by the buildings department to determine whether you can build as an alteration type 1 or you need to get a new building application. We don't use the same standard, so they really shouldn't include that. It confuses the issue. We discussed that at the last hearing, in fact. Calculations on the retained perimeter walls don't match the proposed plans in every location, and the cellar walls, which we've also discussed before, don't count as floor area. So when I did the math, I found that there was still less than 50% of the walls being retained. The sections actually show all but one portion of one perimeter wall removed. So I know there was effort to include more, but I don't think they didn't get there. There was no submission also in support of the second floor imposition into the required rear yard, which we also discussed at the last hearing. the floor plans at the second floor show there's ample room to pull back further, and they should do that. We, again, talked about that at the last. Unfortunately, we had a technical glitch at that hearing, and the video for the hearing isn't available, but I think we have an audio recording, which we'll try to verify what was said, because I go a lot on my own notes, and to the extent that other things happen during the hearing, I may not have noted it. So, any other comments?
I have also threshold question, and this is something I'm not clear how, and this goes to the DOB. As per zoning resolution section 2345, the minimum required front yard depth in an R5 is 10 feet unless existing depth exceeds 10 feet. Then the depth of the front yard shall be minimum 18. As per the drawing submitted and the zoning chart, the existing depth of the front yard here is indicated as 19 feet 5 inches. Thus, the proposed expansion that would reduce the front yard to 10 feet is my question. Now, that may be because there is a porch in the front yard, but it's it's not an open porch. So an open porch is a permitted obstruction. So I would like DOB to weigh in on this to determine, A, is this porch an open porch? Is it a permitted obstruction? If it is, then the existing front yard is 19 feet 5 inches. And therefore, a minimum of 18 feet of front yard would be permitted, not 10, as being proposed.
So if it is a permitted obstruction, then you have to maintain at least 18.
Yeah.
Right. With regards to lot coverage, the analysis,
Yeah, okay. Okay, good. No, just wow, okay.
no, I.
Yeah, no,
this-
that's a
Yeah.
really
It's just
interesting
a,
observation.
it's a
Yeah, yeah.
DOB
Yes.
question.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think we have seen any case like that.
Let's see.
Yes,
Yeah, I think we should ask for a ZRD one. Then, in the proposed condition, the lot coverage analysis that has been shown shows a much more a generic footprint, and it includes this little, it includes this little
That
one little
Square.
square. And that actually increases the lot coverage way more, and if you, that should be revised. Those are just my two comments.
Okay. So in other words, if you took out that one little square.
I think it
yeah.
comes to close to 45%, which is what is permitted. So it will be a little bit over 45%.
Okay. So that one little square is on what side of the building? This the north
It's
side.
on the
of
north
building.
side,
Little square, I don't know.
yeah.
Okay.
Item number 21, 2016-4208BZ, 142 West 19th Street, Manhattan.
Sorry. Okay, the as of right was amended, but it shows the basement labeled as bedrooms. I thought we talked about this already. It's not a basement, it's a cellar.
They revised it.
No, the as of right, I didn't see revised.
Oh.
I was submitted, it was revised. There are bedrooms in what's called a basement, but it's not a basement, it's a cellar. It's 10 feet below the curb. So we talked about this already, so it doesn't comply with MDL requirements. So how can they have, and so then we're comparing apples to bananas, and it's not the same. And I'm confused about why that even happened, because we talked about this so long, and they went to DOB to talk about cellar units being occupied and so on, and then they leave it in the as of right.
Oh, I thought it had to do with the rear yard size, and that the rear yard in the as of right was 30 feet. That's why I thought then that was okay, and whereas in the proposed it was 22. I didn't even catch that.
No,
That's
no,
what I
no. It's a
thought.
multiple dwelling law requirement. There's no cellar occupancy, period. So, and so then they had to take it out, right? And I think they went to DOB to see whether, I don't know why DOB would have let them, because it's not allowed, but. So the proposal was revised to eliminate the cellar bedrooms, but otherwise no changes were made to the building massing, other than a slight reduction in the size of one stair bulkhead. The proposed continues to request an 8-foot rear yard, 8% lot coverage increase, and a 13-foot height and 5-foot height setback waivers. I thought we discussed at the last hearing setting back at the minimum 15 feet required by the zoning resolution. That's kind of assuming that the height waivers would be an acceptable waiver at all. With respect to the, at respect to the A finding, I'm still struggling with the hardship imposed by the site, which I see really only as shallow and not especially narrow compared to other sites, because it's wide, kind of where you need it to be wide, and then it necks down where there's no building or not much of a building. At the last hearing, we also discussed the idea of a duplex unit using the cellar level being designed as a desirable unit with rear yard access, so not essentially discounted for being in the cellar. That wasn't done. Instead, the cellar level becomes quite a nasty rec room space and so on. And so my feeling about it, just from those very basic comments, are the A finding isn't supporting more than a rear yard reduction because it's a 92-foot deep lot. And I'll let others add to that.
Well, I originally, when this case first came on, was not convinced that this property had a hardship in terms of the soil contamination, because I felt that the need to dig down to provide that full cellar was what was driving the project, to provide the fancy duplex apartment on the ground floor / cellar. Now that they have revised that apartment so that it's really an undesirable unit and they've priced it accordingly, it doesn't justify the $750,000 premium cost that they had originally set aside for that, because you're losing about $600,000 in the sales price now that they've downgraded the price of that unit. So it doesn't even make sense to actually dig down. And that's not even getting to what you're going to say. I was just talking from an economic standpoint.
Right.
So, I mean, I could hold my financial comments till after the
Yeah, so,
commissioner speaks.
yeah, maybe do
Yeah,
that and then we'll
because
go
he's
back.
A.
Yeah, right. Stay in the A department, right.
So I did look at the description of the hardship evidence, and I can classify them into, one is related to the geometry of the property, which described the property as small and narrow, irregular, and I don't believe 2 feet or 4 feet and 90 feet depth of the property makes it uniquely irregular. This is one thing. The other thing, in the statement of facts, they are describing the narrowing in depth as 17%. I actually looked at this percentage, 17%. I divided the 4 feet difference by the 22, which is the narrow depth, by the 26, which is the wider side, and by the 90 feet something, which is the depth, and I couldn't get to the 17%. So for me, it sounds like it's just making up numbers. I also looked at the subsurface conditions, and I wonder, first of all, we want to take a look at the survey for the property, because my understanding is the boring was done from inside the cellar. The boring that was submitted, LB2 or B2, was done inside the cellar, which was about 5.5 feet below the sidewalk. And this boring indicates that the rock is 11 feet below the top of the boring. If the rock is 11 feet below the top of the boring, which is 5.5 feet below the sidewalk, that means that the rock is encountered about 17 feet below the sidewalk. So the rock is not there, even with the excavation. The rock is not going to be encountered, and it's not going to be excavated. On the other side, if the rock is going to be encountered, if this boring is done from the sidewalk elevation, and the rock is 11 feet below the sidewalk, the presence of the rock, the existence of the rock on a building like the proposed, it cannot make the conditions, the actual conditions, worse than the typical conditions. So by talking about typical conditions, I mean that rock is not there and you just have like very regular, stable, structurally stable subsurface conditions like sand or silty sand. If you have silty sand and you have rock and you want to compare these two options or two alternatives, the existence of the rock should make the conditions much better than the absence of the rock. So I'm not sure where from they are coming with the idea to use the presence of the rock as a source of hardship. I did look at one of the cost analyses tables, and it's dated May 8th, and in this table, looking at one of the items, which is the excavation support and the underpinning, it's very clear that the presence of the rock make the conditions much better from the cost perspective of the excavation support and the underpinning. One more thing, I did go through that cost analysis table, and the feeling I got at the end is that whoever prepared that table is trying to just put numbers and exaggerate the cost on the as of right side. Of course, I understand why they are doing that. For examples here, one of the items that was used is rock leveling. I have 27 years working in construction. I heard about rock excavation, rock blasting, line drilling, but I never heard of something called rock leveling. Rock usually gets excavated and then gets sealed, and then we put the foundation on top of that. I never heard, seen, or even recommended something called rock leveling. And this is not a small amount. This is about 80 grand worth of work. One more thing, I saw that they are using a mat slab, mat foundation type. If rock is there, rock is very strong, extremely strong compared to a subsurface condition that contains sand or silty sand. So why are you using mat foundation if you have rock condition? Use spread footings. The groundwater table, they talked about groundwater table is shallow. Again, I looked at the boring. The groundwater table is about 2 feet or 4 feet into rock. When they core the rock with the barrel core, if you have real groundwater, this groundwater should be above the top of the rock. In the boring they submitted, the groundwater encountered or the water encountered is actually below the top of the rock. That indicates that this could be either a drilling fluid or it could be just a pushed water condition. If you have a condition like this and you want to use underslab drainage, I can understand, I can tolerate the use of the underslab drainage and putting that cost for just pushed water condition or just some water that seeped into that hole, that court. It doesn't make any sense. So we need to get surveyed. We need to get a copy of the geotechnical report. We need to understand why the existence of the rock is understood as it's a source of hardship, while our opinion is it should be the opposite. It should be a source of relief, actually, for the applicant.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Thank you. What was it they had, what was the, they're having subslab,
Underslab drainage,
underslab?
yes.
Need underslab, okay. Good. Okay, so then you want to,
Right, so then I'm not going to, I guess, argue any of the points that are still in play for the A finding. I'm
Right.
just going to talk about what we had seen in the previous report and the corrections we asked that be made. So one of the major corrections had to do with changing the configuration of that cellar apartment so there would be no living space in the cellar floor. And so what ends up happening is they've then adjusted the sales price per square foot of that apartment, saying that it's no longer as valuable as it used to be. And they're adjusting it down so low that it's actually affecting the overall average sales price of all of the apartments in the proposed. So that brings the overall average sales price per square foot down so that it's now lower than the as of right. And it reduces it so much that you can't even recoup the loss of the $500,000 by having that extra study room in each of the apartments above. It does nothing to help. So it leads me to think that at this point, why even bother excavating down to put anything in the cellar that's living area? You're better off just not going down any lower and just having your apartment start on the first floor, because you're not getting any bump from it. You're creating space and you're not getting the most amount of money that you can for it. We also asked that they take off the extra space on the roof of both the as-of-right and the proposed. And I was looking to see that there would be a decrease in the construction costs because of that, but there hasn't been a decrease in construction costs because of that. And in fact, the construction costs of the as-of-right actually go up by $1,000 a square foot. So I actually mean go up by $1,000 in total. So the total development costs decreased by $227,000, but that's mostly due to a site value reduction, and I'm not even sure why we requested that site value reduction and why we received it. So when you take that out, what's left is that you actually have an increase in your hard construction costs by $1,000 and a decrease of your soft costs by $3,500. So I'm not understanding what's going on there. I think what they did is they took this opportunity to completely reprice the entire project using today's prices, and that's not what we asked for. And it's really interesting because the financial applicant, in responding to the opposition, was talking about fixing costs at a point in time so that we could actually have a benchmark and then have an analysis going forward. And they do the exact opposite, because if they reprice the project, there's no way to know how much they actually took off for the lost space on that roof. And also, another thing they did, which I think they need to take out absolutely, is they now have this new thing, which is high-level finishes, which for the first time in this entire project, they've decided, oh, wow, we want high-level finishes, and we didn't price those in before. We had, I don't know what level finishes they had, but we want to add $80,000 to the construction costs for the as-of-right and $118,000 for the proposed to account for these high-level finishes. And frankly, in this project, I don't think it was ever thought that there would not be high-level finishes. These are, luxury condominium units, so I'm sure that the money for those fixtures was already included. And so at this point in time, I'm not accepting that increase in construction costs at all. That's basically it. I feel like after looking at this report and looking at the way in which they dropped the price of that cellar unit, I just think, I go back to the A case and I think that, the A case has just been chopped in half, because there certainly is no need at this point to excavate and to have that premium of $750,000 in excavation costs, because you don't recapture it in your proposed at all.
So when you say a case chopped in half, you mean the subject about any kind of cost for cellar has to be taken out?
Right, that excavation of rock and all of that, it's not necessary. They're not getting anything from it. And now that we see what Commissioner Shetta said, which basically said that if you have rock, it's actually a better situation, and I assume what you mean is that because then you're defraying some of your support onto that rock.
Yeah, I believe for them, if they want to excavate from whatever elevation on site right now to the top of the rock, they want to do that to benefit from putting the footings directly on the rock. So they gain from better bearing, better design parameters. So actually, they get something because of that excavation. So if they want to excavate that extra 5 feet or so, they shouldn't penalize the cost of the as of right. They're gonna benefit from that, actually. One more thing about that underslab drainage I forgot to mention. Again, the feeling I got looking at that cost analysis and cost table is they are just dumping numbers. For example, the underslab drainage that is, in my opinion, that's not totally needed because there is no standing groundwater underneath that cellar. For that underslab drainage, they are not just adding the cost of the pipe system, but they are claiming that the installation of this system will take them 3 months, which is gonna cost them money. The amount actually is right here, I'm looking at it, it's 225 grand, just for the 3-month extra duration item, plus the cost of the underslab drainage. I believe these just 2 items together are about $300,000. So they need to take a look at the cost items that they submitted in that table, and I believe if they want to extra excavate, they should deduct something for that, because they are benefiting from, again, putting the foundation on the rock.
So maybe if you have that 750,000, you're saying that the other construction costs should be reduced?
Yes.
So then, yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Anything else?
No, this,
I think, from my perspective, not sure if we've established the financials with respect to the rear yard reduction, but in terms of the A, well, as a standalone, right? It seems like the only thing you've got is your 92-foot deep lot.
right.
And then the focus on the difference in terms of the financials should be looked at in order to see whether there's actually a B, right?
Right, so what you're suggesting is maybe they should be just looking at a rear yard reduction.
Yes.
And that's it.
And that's it.
And don't go above the 2 adjacent buildings.
Right, right. And, that's the whole subject of neighborhood character, but more the subject of waiving the sliver law, which I have a lot of trouble with from an urbanistic perspective. Not that the neighborhood kind of can handle height, but we're talking about a height restriction that is not easily tinkered with, it seems to me. And in this case, there probably are other cases where the hardship is huge, and you could imagine waiving an aspect of the sliver law very carefully, but this doesn't seem to be one of those cases. Okay, thank you.
Item number 22, 2016-4464BZ, 1350 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. The side yard here is no longer proposed to be reduced to less than the existing 8 foot 9 inches, so we don't need to get into a DOB determination about side yard regs that apply to a non-conforming structure. That was the trick. It was kind of like, how do you get your head around side yard regs when the structure itself is non-conforming? The roof line was revised so that it's a continuous slope from the adjoining structure, which I think is an improvement over the last version. A rendering was also provided to show it in context. Just in general, rooftop additions to these attached houses are really problematic. But I think, given the givens, this one's as unobtrusive as we can achieve and still have that rooftop addition. It's not great. We did see another one that was approved by the board that's actually adjacent to another house that's before us, and it's terrible. So this one is somewhat less so. That's not the most recent, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay. So, any other
No,
comments on
I actually didn't have any issues with the first one, but this works too, and it's not a significant increase in the overall visual bulk, so I'm satisfied.
Okay. Any other?
Item number 23, 2017-45BZ, 3896 10th Avenue, Manhattan.
Plans were submitted. My notes indicate we had discussed adding air quality notes to the drawings. I see noise and natural gas notes were added. We do have a DOT sign-off as of October 18th. We have DEP sign-off for noise and air quality and OER e-designation for hazmat with conditions. I don't know that there's any other issues that are open. Anybody on this one? Am I right? All that stuff? Okay.
Item number 24, 2017-188BZ, 1727 Ocean Parkway, Brooklyn.
Okay. This is again going to the threshold question about whether you're retaining enough existing floor area. The section shows, and so it needs to be corrected, it shows the first floor joist to be removed. Other notes on other drawings show that the joists are existing joists to be lowered in the new beam pockets. That the latter is required, or that would be too much removal of existing floor area, so that note has to be added to the sections. The elevator, this is the building that's adjacent to the other attached house with the really not successful rooftop addition. The elevator at the rear was moved forward more into the house to allow the imposition in the rear yard to be reduced, which is what we asked them to do. But I don't know why the second floor wasn't also reduced, so there's only a 2-foot reduction in the second floor rear yard, which I think isn't even a gesture, and there's plenty of room to pull it back, which also we discussed at the last hearing. We discussed that the house is enormous, that the FAR is high for the area, and that pulling back the second floor should be respectful of the adjacent properties and would reduce the impact, and they didn't do that. So I really think there's plenty of room to play in this very enormous house. They did pull back the third floor to comply with the rear yard, and I think the second floor needs to come back also because the house is so massive at the back. Anybody else?
New cases, item number 1, 2016-4328BZ, 51 Astor Place, Manhattan. This is the legalization of PCE. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, it's not a legalization. It's not a legalization.
Not a
sorry.
legalization, no. Oh, it is a legalization.
It is
Yes,
a legalization.
It opened
January 12th.
January.
All right, so we got to change that then.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, every PCE that we're looking at is a legalization today. We have proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, and the applicant posted notice of hearing in the lobby of the building, which I think is a really good standard that all of the legalizations should just do, even if it's something that's not ordinarily thought of as a noisy PCE. You just never know, like, what kinds of things neighbors might have problems with. And since they're legalizations, and I think our rules should probably change so that there's more notice to the neighbors for the PCEs, so that everybody knows that that's the standard when you're doing a legalization. I didn't find proof of service of initial application to officials in the file, but Community Board issued its recommendation. Bless you. I also didn't find DOI sign-off in the file.
All right, I'll check that.
We need that.
Okay.
And we do have affidavits from fire alarm and sprinkler inspection companies indicating the systems are installed and operational. Bless you. Along with photos and plans of the installation. And they provided sound attenuation measures that are described and shown on the plans. Anybody else?
I think in the spirit of the Halloween, there were some, when I went on a site visit, there were some very nice Halloween decorations that took place. Unfortunately, it was blocking the elevator. So they just need to make sure that it doesn't, it was all in the spirit of Halloween. It's a temporary thing, but just need to make sure it was not, that's all.
Okay. Okay.
Item number 2, 2016-4467BZ, 6925 Astoria Boulevard, Queens.
This is, I
Sign.
think this is
Sign.
quite an interesting one. We have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I didn't find proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, although we did receive a letter of objection from a neighbor, so we really need the proof. I scoured the file, but I didn't find it. Community Board 1 recommended a conditional approval with 8 opposed. I'm going to read their conditions. It says advertising on billboards will remain in print form and will not be digitized or electronic in any manner. Winston Network, the owner, will agree not to display advertising with sexually explicit content on billboards. I'm not sure they're allowed to do that anyway, but anyhow. Billboard lighting will be minimized and focused away from the residential area so as not to impact adjacent residences. The east-facing billboard will be reduced in overall size, which is actually, and they give the dimensions. And they noted the following issues that were discussed in their hearing. The fact that the owner was in non-compliance with the requirement to remove the signs within 10 years of 1961 zoning resolution. The owner's financial gain from leasing the advertising space after 1971, the potential for changing the display format from paper to digital, and the type of content that would be displayed. So there were 3 letters of opposition. With respect to the A finding, they must establish, first of all, that the site wasn't partitioned off to this undersized lot and hence created the hardship complained of. And since the sign has been in place since prior to 61, I think in this case, it's fair to look at partitioning prior to the enactment of the zoning resolution. The 1951, and interestingly, so confusingly, the 1951 to 2006 Sanborns that were given to us appear to show the lot is part of tax lot 47 with a structure on it, whether that structure is the sign or what, it seemed to look like a garage.
No, it is the structure.
It just shows this rectangle with an A, or I couldn't read the letter that's on it, but and I don't know what it stands for because I didn't have access to a key, but it shows a letter in it and I didn't know what it was for. So they need to provide copies of deeds. They did provide us like with a chart of title, but that's not the same as meets and bounds. So they need to provide copies of deeds showing the meets and bounds and establishing that it was also not held in common ownership with adjacent lots. The likelihood of common ownership for me is underscored by the fact that a significant portion of the sign structure extends into lot 47. I'm trying to play out, if these were separately owned lots and I have a fence, or I know where my property line is every day when I go out to barbecue, right? And then that one morning I go out and there's this sign hanging something like 20 feet over onto my property line. I don't think I would have been okay with just getting $11,000 a year or whatever it was back in the day, right? I think I instead would have told them, get that thing off my property. So it seems as if back in the day there was common ownership, and how they decided where to put the property line obviously was something, who knows?
And even till 2006, the Sanborn map shows lot 21 and 47 was continuous.
Yes.
One, there was, so.
Right, so, and what the Sanborn was looking at that is a little confusing, because in 1982, there was a deed given to Winston, whatever, which is a sign company. So it was subdivided in 1982, and the Sanborn never picked up that subdivision, maybe because they saw the sign extending over the property line and saying, well, it must be the same, and the tax lot information is irrelevant to that. But the proposal is to actually cut the sign back now to hit the property line.
So I think the note somewhere, it said that they may retain the signage, and there was something, it's, I have it in my notes. You keep going, I'll pick it up and I'll let you.
Because the community board also wanted the sign reduced in size, but the proposal is to reduce it so that, the proposal that I saw was to reduce it so it meets the property line. The statement of facts also, with respect to this initial threshold question, is states that it is unable to confirm whether it may satisfy section 23-33 with respect to existing small lots. that seems to me to be their admitting that they can't prove that the lot was the lot of record prior to 61. Therefore, they can't qualify as a small lot. Therefore, that goes right to the initial A finding, self-created, or actually, that's the D finding. Say A and the D, right. And this, and then noted, the property was purchased by a sign company in '82, which was 10 years after the amortization period had expired. For sure, because this is like one of the biggest sign companies in the country who were dealing with all of these subjects about signage and arterial highways and everything. For sure, they knew that the amortization period as to this sign had lapsed. They are extremely sophisticated buyers. So, so I think that, there's no question that the lot as configured is unusual, unique, a funny, an odd shape, and so on. I think the sale of the property to an adjoining owner in this case should actually be considered as a way to address this hardship, because if you look at the two adjoining owners, one's a lumber yard and one is,
It works very well with the diner. I mean,
And
it
the
seems like
diner.
it's almost looks like
Yes.
it's a physical extension of the diner.
right. Yeah, exactly. So I can understand why the residential owner might not want it, because it's extending to the commercial frontage, but, and, I understand that the board has in its past had looked at something to that effect of looking at whether a property that's strangely configured might be instead sold to an adjoining property owner as a way of curing the hardship. That's something that we'll look at in terms of the board history. But with respect to character issues, and this is for me really important, the sign is within 200 feet of the arterial of the Grand Central Parkway. It's like, it may be 60 feet
It
away.
fails to meet all the signage requirements
Yes,
in terms of the highway, within 100 feet of a residential, all of those requirements.
right, all of them. So the waivers are much more than a sign in an R district. It's a sign within 250 feet. It's an advertising sign within 200 feet of an arterial. And I just think that that in terms of the character issue, though the community board was okay with it because it's been an existing thing, we're also charged with looking at the imposition, the danger posed to drivers that is part of the Highway Beautification Act and all of that. I think we're being asked to thwart that.
And I think we need to be careful. This is a sign, and there are two other similar signs on to the west or east of it. And I think one of them is before us. And all these three signs are in that same situation. They're in residential district, but uses are commercial. And these signs are not permitted to operate. And I think each one is looking towards the other one to wait and see for it to apply. And so we need to be extremely mindful of how we deliberate on this one and how it's going to affect the other sites. And of course, each one will be weighed in on its own merit, because some are sitting on larger sites than this one, but I think we just
No,
need to
I
be
agree.
cognizant of that.
Plus, if we talk about amortization, they were supposed to have 10 years. They had 56 years to amortize. That's a lot of amortization. And if we just talk about 1982 as the purchase time, but it actually, they think Winston bought it from Metro Media. So Metro Media was the prior owner, and then I can't find the deeds prior to that to just check the meets and bounds because it's just not online. They also mentioned good faith reliance in their application materials. Good faith reliance on a permit where the statute tells you in so many words, take it down.
And use.
Yeah.
That's it. Done.
That can't be good faith reliance. I don't care how many times the Department of Buildings accidentally reissues a permit, not that they showed us that it did, but the statute couldn't be clearer. The mistake by DOB, if it made any mistakes, but they never showed us the permits anyway, couldn't be clearer. And then also, in terms of what should be done here, we talked about this already, a commercial use, it seems, is appropriate. low-rise, you know, there are apartment windows staring at the back of this, I'm not even sure they're the back, because it's a double-faced sign, so.
Yeah, did you?
I just want to point out that, they also said that the adjacent property owners were maintaining the site. I just want to make sure that wasn't lost.
Adjacent property owner is.
Lumberyard or the Jackson
I
Home?
believe it's the diner. that
Diner.
is
Diner.
maintaining-
Seems like
already
so.
maintaining the site,
Yeah,
just
okay.
in general.
That's
and
wonderful.
That
Sounds like,
this applicant also will be coming for a variance for billboard just to the west of this as well. So.
oh,
just-
so they own, so this is,
This is the one
So
on to
they
the west
own-
of it.
So, yeah, to the west, to the east, that's not before us right now, but to the
But it
west.
will
But,
be.
yeah. So just to keep that in mind, that the other one is very close to this one.
the sign to the west.
That's correct.
Immediately
And
to the
EAS
west.
for this is tied to that sign as well, because we didn't want to segment out the EAS.
Oh,
Yeah, because it's segmentation otherwise.
Yeah.
Environmental review.
oh,
So just to bear that all in mind.
okay, and when is that supposed to come?
They're still waiting, they're still trying to resubmit my notice of comments. They're missing some things for that one, that's taking time to get.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
With regards to the signage, as I was talking about, I think the note, somewhere in the statement of fact, it says that the metal sign structure may remain even if the advertising
Yes.
faces are removed and it's non-compliant.
That has to do with code, building code versus zoning. So there isn't any zoning restriction on installing a structure on the site. So if it's a structure, you know, it's a really large laundry dryer, or I don't know what, you know, for non-commercial purposes, right? So I think that's the thing, that the zoning regulations aren't clear about structures being installed when the structures don't
I
have
see.
a specified use, right? So it's just an objet, right? Okay, Commissioner.
So I have some financial questions, but to me, I think you've raised the larger questions and certainly the more important questions, like the amortization question, whereon at the end of the amortization term, the owner is made whole. That's the idea behind it. And so then, that should take signage off of the table completely going forward, in my view. And also the self-created possibility, if that lot was apportioned out at a substandard size like that, you then cannot then claim that you have a very small lot, and it's unusually small. So I think those are the larger issues, but if you get down to the financials, there are a few, corrections that need to be made, like with the site value, the comparables are not divided by the proper max FAR, and so that needs to be looked at and then redone.
Because they included the attic bonus, is that what you mean?
No, they go even further than the attic
Okay.
bonus. So like, for instance, they're doing a 0.95 on the R4 comps, and they're doing a 1.65 on the R5 comps. So in one, they're just, I don't know where they got the 0.95 from, and in the other one, they're taking advantage of the infill,
Oh,
and incorporating it into the as of right. So they need to just redo that. Their retail comps should be adjusted. They should be adjusted upwards and for the size, because the comparables are all much larger than the retail that's going to be on the site. So the construction costs, to me, are way too high across the board. So they need to review that. I don't understand why it would be $445 a square foot for a one-family home when you don't have any subsurface issues whatsoever. You're just gonna put a home up there. I mean, I could certainly see where the sales prices might be low for a one or a two-family home, but not the construction costs. And I think the cap rate used for a sign, to me, is way too high. It's at 16. We've never seen anything at 16%. I don't think it's terribly risky a proposition, because you have
Since
very
you already-
little to develop. And so any money you get is icing on the cake in a situation like that.
not to mention the desirability of this location.
Exactly, right
Second,
on the highway.
yeah.
Thank you for answering that question I had. How do you determine the cap rate in this case? Like, what would be the rule?
They look and see what the national cap rates are, and they should then apply some kind of analysis and set it before us. But I think 16,
Is-
based on the fact that they're saying that the income stream is risky, I'm not believing it.
No. If it were risky, they wouldn't be here.
Exactly. Or if there was a sign maybe in the middle of somebody's backyard on a very, very large block where there's absolutely no viewpoint to the sidewalk or anything, maybe that would be risky because who would want to
Yeah.
put something there? But this is in a prime place.
This is prime, right.
So I think both of you have answered most of my comments. From a neighborhood point of view, as I mentioned, we need to be mindful of there are others waiting in queue, as I would call it. And the more importantly is that on Ditmars, you have residential buildings, these semi-detached buildings, and the signage that's is being proposed, it's going to light up their rooms. They wouldn't need any indoor lighting. And it will spill beyond Ditmars because these are semi-detached. There's enough space in between. As I was driving through, you could see the sign through those buildings. So the lighting will spill beyond just the Jackson Hole Diner and the lumberyard. And not to mention the two residential buildings that are on Hazen Street that will also be emblazoned with this. So I do have concerns on the neighborhood character issue and thus also not meeting all the basic elements of the signage requirements that we always look for, especially on arterial highway and other things.
And building off the Vice Chair's comments, we determined that this needed an urban design review by the Department of City Planning. So DCP is currently analyzing this for urban design.
Ah, okay.
Given the size of the sign.
Yeah. Even though they're proposing, they would meet the community board's recommendation, they will bring the size down. I think regardless, it's just too big for a residential neighborhood and being close to the highway.
So DCP is reviewing it for urban design impacts,
That's correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Commissioner Shetta, do you have,
No,
anybody, did you want to add something?
No, I just said when DCP is reviewing, they're just reviewing this particular site alone.
They have to actually review.
Or do they have to review the other one also, just
They
for
travel in
the?
tandem.
They do because the EAS is no longer, originally it was two EASs, but we determined that was segmentation. So they'll have to
Review
review
both.
both billboards.
Okay, thank you.
Under one analysis.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. And the reason we didn't want to review this in tandem, just because they didn't submit the application yet, but we knew about the second application.
That's correct. They were both submitted
They
at
both
the same.
submitted at
They were
the
both
same
submitted
time.
at the same time, yeah, be counted
Okay.
on us first. Yeah.
But I'm wondering if that even goes to hardship issues. If you own multiple sites, right, it's a different thing than if you only own, is it maybe? Is it a different thing than if you own?
Variance, the variance is site specific.
It's site specific.
In this case, it's
Unless they
within
were on
50
the
feet
same-
of each other almost.
They're on the same zoning lot.
They're not on the
They're
same
not.
zoning
No,
block.
they're not on
You're
the
right.
same
They're
zoning
not.
lot.
They're totally on they're
Well-
on two different blocks.
They're on different blocks.
They're on two different blocks, but the distance
okay.
between each sign is
Not very far.
not very much. If you Google
I
it,
mean,
actually, in
the
this
other
picture, you
sign
can
is
see
part of
the
the
other sign.
neighborhood character, arguably, but I don't,
Right.
personally don't see why you would wait.
I only have a
Well,
little
so
piece
the
of it,
environmental
so here's the
review
sign.
will
This is-
capture
this is-
part of
And
that.
there's another one right
Capture
here.
those and
Oh.
capture
Sure.
those.
Okay.
This one and this one.
Not to talk about, we won't talk about, not to talk about the other one, but there are unique situations with that sign as well that are different than this.
Right.
That is true.
Right, okay, yeah, I see, okay. Okay, any other comments? No, interesting case. Okay. Good.
Okay. Item number 3, not to rush the commissioners, but it is 12:15 and we only have the room to 12:30.
Oh,
So
these
item
are all
number
fast.
3, 2017-97 BZ, 55 Washington Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, also a legalization. We approve of service of initial application to officials and notice of service to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. They provided sprinkler inspection reports and photos of installed sprinklers and fire alarms, but we really do need an affidavit from the fire alarm installer inspector. Working on it, okay. We do have DOI and LPC sign off. I just want them to clarify the days of operation because it says daily, but I don't know if that's Monday to Friday or Monday to Sunday. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this?
Item number 4, 2017-140BZ, 55 Prospect Street, Brooklyn.
It's also a legalization that opened in January. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and notice of service to officials and neighbors. We don't have a community board recommendation. We do have one letter in support. I didn't find the DOI in the file.
All right, I'll check.
Okay, there are approved plans and DOB sign-offs for sprinkler and fire alarm and photos showing them installed. We do need affidavits from the installers. This is a yoga studio, so sound attenuation isn't really an issue. However, they did provide drawings that show insulation between the partitions and details and STC ratings on the plan. Anybody, any other comments? No? Okay.
Item number 5, 2017-227BZ, 313, 321 West 37th Street, Manhattan.
Also a legalization opened last week. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. And happily, hearing notice was posted in the building lobby. Community Board 4 recommends approval. In this case, we do have DOI. We have sprinkler installers affidavit, sprinkler plans, and photos showing sprinkler heads and fire alarms installed. We have fire alarm plans, but no affidavit or other indication that the system was installed and is operational. We really need that, because I got the impression that all they did was get approval and didn't
Oh,
install.
I think they just submitted an affidavit.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. This, today?
I saw it in the email, it says
Oh.
affidavit regarding the operational status of the sprinkler
something that was
system
submitted.
at the
Yeah.
premises.
But it was just sprinkler. You know, the affidavit. You wanted fire alarm.
Right.
Fire alarms, we have.
This is
Oh.
sprinkler we did get on
Oh,
Friday.
okay,
We need
sorry.
fire
Yeah.
alarms. There
Yeah, on
wasn't-
Friday we got
So we're
that.
missing the fire alarm application.
Veronica had sent them a request for both. Also, sound attenuation was installed, and they should have details shown on the drawings, and they show the installation. Any other comments? Let's see, affidavit at the fire, yeah. Okay,
Item number 6, 2017-281BZ, 23 Beacon Court, Brooklyn. This is a build-a-back. Right.
and so, like all the Build It Back, I'm requesting that the board waive its rules of application. And in this case, they needed front yard and, well, they needed waivers. This is a new construction on a site where there was an existing non-complying house, and the new construction increases the degree of non-compliance on the yards. So it reduces and increases and so on. So hence the special permit.
Right.
And we'll be hearing this first.
We'll be hearing this,
We'll hear
we'll be
this
calling
first,
this
yes.
first, just to let everybody know. Okay, this concludes the public review session for October 30th, 2017.
Okay.